So DDP just beat Sean Strickland, and honestly, he's created quite an insane resume at middleweight. I mean, Whitaker, Adesanya, Strickland twice, and right after he beat Strickland this time, he called out Pereira in the octagon, and the cameraman did a terrible job, by the way. I mean, he didn't even put the camera on Pereira. But this is a matchup that we could be seeing in the very near future, so in this video, I've decided to break down and predict this potential matchup. And you guys already know how it goes. Let's start off by going over the strengths and weaknesses of each fighter. So DDP is a very versatile fighter. That means he's gonna have a lot of different strengths. And personally, I think one of his biggest strengths is how unorthodox he is on the feet. I mean, he has very weird footwork, he has a very weird rhythm too, and overall he's just a really weird style to fight against. And it makes it very hard to adjust to, and I think it's one of the reasons to why he's able to stand and outstrike the best strikers in the division. And another reason he's able to do that is because of his insane durability and his power. The guy's a master at blitzing in and throwing big meaty hooks, and off that you might think he's a brawler, and you might be right. I mean, you would be right. Most of the time he is a brawler. But in his last fight he actually had a very technical approach on the feet, and he didn't really engage in brawls with Strickland, which surprised me. Instead he had a very kicking heavy approach, which is a very underrated part of his game, by the way, especially his lead kicks. I mean, they're super fast, he just flicks them out there. And besides his striking, he's a pretty solid grappler as well. I mean, he took down Whitaker and Adesanya and Strickland, and on the ground, he has nasty ground and pound too, some of the best in the division in my opinion. Now he does have some weaknesses though, and the first one is his defense, but his defense isn't actually too bad. You know, he keeps his hands quite high and his hands always go back to his shin, but the problem is that he doesn't really use parries or specific blocks. His hands are just kind of sitting there, and it does provide protection to some degree, but for the most part, if you get hit on your hands or on your arm while you're blocking punches, the power is going to transfer through your guard and it's going to result in some damage. It also makes him pretty vulnerable for body shots because he does keep his hands so high, which resulted in Adesanya targeting the body a lot. And then there's also the fact that he sometimes just rushes forward and throws punches. And I don't know the exact term for it, it might be called switch hitting, and it actually works pretty well, but it does make him pretty susceptible for counters. Like if you just put your head off the center line and throw out the right hand, he's gonna be running right into that and it's gonna cause a lot of damage. Pereira is of course a striker, and I would actually go as far as to say he's the best striker in the UFC right now. The guy often gets a lot of credit for his power, but something that is quite overlooked is how skilled and technical of a striker he is. You can't become glory champion in 2 weight classes without having S-tier technique. And people forget, man, Pereira was actually outstriking Adesanya in their first and second fight in MMA. Just had to piss off the Adesanya fans there. He's also very good at setting up that deadly left hook. The fight against Strickland is a perfect example of that. Pereira threw a bunch of jabs to the chest of Strickland and basically conditioned Strickland to overparry whenever Pereira threw his left hand. And then he threw his deadly left hook and slept him. And speaking about the left hook, his left hook is probably the most dangerous weapon he has. Once he touches his opponent with it, it is basically guaranteed he's knocking them out. I don't know how he has so much power in that thing. Another weapon he has are the leg kicks. Pereira has some of the nastiest leg kicks in MMA right now. Zero telegraph when he throws those kicks. Like he was out leg kicking the leg kicking merchant Adesanya himself. The only weakness Pereira has in his striking is his lack of defense though. He does get tagged a decent amount in his fights, but that weakness actually gets cancelled out by his stone chin, and he also rolls with a lot of punches, so it takes away some of the sting from the punches that do land. And of course the most obvious weakness Pereira has is his grappling. Everyone who's done well against him has done it by taking him down. Now we're gonna go over the win conditions, and obviously DDP is gonna want to take this fight to the ground in order to neutralize Pereira's striking, and I think a lot of his opponents that has done well against him has used his grappling. Adesanya in the first fight, during the first fight, Blachowicz, and on the feet it is gonna be hard for DDP. I don't think he can play that point game like he did with Strickland and out tit for tat him. The blitzes can work very well, Roundtree showed us that, and that might be something he can utilize here. And I also think he should use his kicks a lot here because it's one of his best weapons on the feet. And he should also try to weaponize his pace here. As I said, trying to outpoint Pereira on the feet is pointless, and he will eventually catch catch you. Now when it comes to Pereira, he's obviously gonna want to keep it on the feet. Now I think his usual approach is gonna work pretty well here, and by that I mean staying at range and leg kicking, because DDP stands pretty lead leg heavy, so those leg kicks are gonna work extra well, and he's also gonna want to look for that left hook as he always does, either with setups or with counters, and I honestly think counters can work really well in this fight because DDP uses blitz a lot, which means that he sometimes is very susceptible to counters. Now I'm also gonna want to see Pereira mixing it up to the body and the head since DDP keeps his guard so high. Now how do I see this fight going? Well, first of all we have to discuss where this fight would take place, and it's most likely gonna take place at light heavyweight because Alex Pereira is gonna have an extremely hard time cutting down to middleweight. I don't even think he can do it anymore because he's so adjusted to that weight class. Now if this fight would take place at middleweight though, I would pick DDP. I do feel like the weight cut is gonna have an effect on Pereira a lot. His cardio's probably gonna be worse and his shin too, which isn't gonna do him any favors, and especially not against a guy like DDP because having good cardio and a solid shin is very necessary when fighting him. Now Pereira is also a fighter that needs to have a good shin because he is pretty decently hittable, and on top of that he's gonna be physically weaker, which isn't gonna favor him in the grappling exchanges. Now does he still have a chance at middleweight? Absolutely. I do think he's a superior striker by a lot and he can catch DDP, but if you take into the considerations how the weight cut is gonna affect him, I would definitely go with DDP at middleweight. Now at light heavyweight it's a little different, okay? It's a little different because those factors aren't going to be there. We know Pereira has solid cardio at light heavyweight. He was able to go 4 rounds with Roundtree at an extremely high pace, and he also said he was very sick in that fight, and his chin is also naturally gonna be better in my opinion, and we know he has a very good chin because he was able to eat clean shots from Jiri, who's probably the hardest hitter at light heavyweight besides Pereira. Pereira is also extremely tricky to strike against because on one hand he's extremely technical on the outside and he will outpoint you with his leg kicks, but if you close the distance into boxing range you will run the risk of getting caught with that left hook, especially if you close the distance in a slow and sloppy way. And even if you are having success with some things early, Pereira is extremely good at making reads and adjusting to fighting styles, and eventually he will just catch you with something big. So DDP needs to grapple in this fight, and I think he has the ability to dominate Pereira on the ground. He's a very strong guy, he has really good ground and pound, and he is skilled enough to take him down too. The problem is, he kinda doesn't shoot that many takedowns, man. He shot like 2 takedowns against Strickland in their fight, and I understand he didn't shoot that many because he was winning on the feet, but I still think it's something worth bringing up. But on the other hand, he did shoot quite a lot against Adesanya though, so I just disproved myself there. I do think he's probably gonna shoot against Pereira. I mean, for his sake, I hope so. Now, I will say, Pereira has shown that he can survive on the ground, for example when Blachowicz had his back for a whole round, and he probably has improved a lot since then, because that probably is his main focus in training, improving his grappling, because he was already one of the best strikers in the world when he transitioned into MMA. And another problem for DDP is that he is gonna have to enter into Pereira's boxing range or set up takedowns with punches in order to take down Pereira, and that is gonna be harder to do against someone like Pereira than Strickland, for example, because he hits incredibly hard, and if you make one mistake he can catch you with that left hook and put you out cold. So that's why I would go with Pereira here. I think he shoots up his legs in the stand-up, and DDP might get some blitzes off in the beginning. You know, he might go tit for tat in the beginning too, but I think he's quickly gonna realize, you know, I can't do this, I have to roll with him. That's gonna come with a risk, man. But I do think he probably takes him down once or twice, but eventually Pereira is gonna find an opening for that left hook. And it doesn't help that DDP is pretty hittable too. His main defense is just essentially shelling up, and he doesn't really move that well either. He's pretty stationary, and I don't think that's gonna work well against Pereira. I think Pereira's gonna hit him through his guard, pull down his guard and hit him there, mix it up to the body. Like, the reason I think Adesanya did well against Pereira in their first fight was because he did a very good job at avoiding the left hook. You know, he'd lock up his left arm, he would move away from his left side, all that stuff. But DDP isn't gonna do that, he's gonna shell up. and that's just gonna give Pereira so many opportunities to mix it up to the body, hit him with uppercuts through the guard, split his guard, all that kind of stuff. So you get my point. Someone who's stationary and easy to hit isn't generally gonna perform well against someone who hits very hard and is very good at hitting people. But in conclusion, DDP wins at middleweight, but it doesn't really matter too much because the fight will probably go down at light heavyweight, and as of right now, I think Pereira would beat him there. But of course, they both need to get past their current opponents, Ankalaev and Hamzat, in order for this fight to even happen. But that said, I think that's it for today, guys. Check out my last video. It was about Merab versus the bantamweight division. But anyways, thanks for watching. Leave a like, subscribe. Am I just a potard, or do you agree with me? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and also don't forget to share this to a DDP fan. And I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.